Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colonel Richard Kemp.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to join you this evening. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person, but I'm unable to leave Israel right at the moment. And I'm particularly sorry not to be there because this is such a phenomenally important cause that we're all here to support tonight. And I'm very grateful to Harvey Sonning for inviting me to give this address. And it's not so much that I love making an address to an audience, but it's more that it gave me the opportunity to visit an incredible institution a couple of weeks ago here in Israel, which is Yamin Ord. And I'm sure you all know about it, named after the great British officer Ord Wingate, albeit eccentric great British officer. And I can't tell you how inspirational I found the experience of visiting Yamin Ord. It was an incredible place. I met quite a large number of young people from different countries around the world, mostly, I'd say mostly, many of them at least, from Ukraine and Russia. And I was very pleased. I was in Ukraine myself just a few weeks ago, so I was very pleased to be able to compare notes on the homeland of the Ukrainian children there. I wasn't able to do the same with the Russians because I haven't been there for a while. But it was an inspirational experience, not only meeting such fulfilled, happy children that were living there and working there, but also the extraordinary staff under Susan, the wonderful Susan, who I think is with you tonight. The staff are so dedicated, they're so understanding, they're so inspiring of the children as well. And the children themselves, I think, were flourishing, the ones I met, absolutely flourishing in that environment with excellent education, some superb recreational facilities, their own farm, and very nice living accommodation. So I know many of them, or all of them perhaps, are from challenging backgrounds, but they certainly seem to be flourishing there in a way that was extremely impressive. So I would say, maybe I can't speak on their behalf, but I would say on their behalf, the ones I met, that they will be extremely grateful to you for the support you give to this wonderful organization. And many of them expressed to me their gratitude for being able to be in that superb place. I'm speaking to you this evening from the Carlton Hotel in Tel Aviv. Some of you may know it. It's currently the Carlton refugee camp because we have the hotel pretty much full of refugees from Kiryat Shimona in the north and from Ashkelon in the south. Many people have been here for several weeks now. They can't go home. There's still rockets being fired into Ashkelon and up in the north, many rockets being fired also. And even here in Tel Aviv, we've had a lot of rockets. And certainly today, there was at least one volley of rockets fired at Tel Aviv, which were intercepted by Iron Dome. So it's an extraordinary experience for me. I've never really been this up close and personal with so many ordinary Israeli people. When I come here in the past, I normally have meetings with political people, military people, etc. But to be able to meet and live alongside people who, many are from very challenged backgrounds as well, from these cities, making the best of it. Obviously, they don't want to be here. They'd rather be at home. But I just want to mention that because it's a reminder that the only people in this conflict that are refugees are not Palestinians. Okay, the Israelis who are refugees are probably in much better conditions than any of the Palestinians, but nevertheless, they're people who have been forced out of their homes and just want to be back home. I want to tell you, I've been out here now since the Monday after the horrific attack on the 7th of October. I just want to share with you a few things that I've been doing since I arrived here. I've visited the front lines in Gaza and in Lebanon, on the Lebanese border, and I've met many IDF soldiers and commanders on both of those two front lines. And in Lebanon, of course, in the Lebanese border, there are a huge number of IDF soldiers preparing to defend the country from a ground attack. Obviously, there are rockets attacks going on now, but they're preparing to defend from a potential ground attack. And among the soldiers that I've met, many British, including many that I know from the UK, that when I've spoken at, in some cases I've spoken at their schools in the UK, and I've met them before. There are many people from countries all around the world. And also I found the experience of talking to them deeply, deeply inspirational. You, all of you, would be deeply proud of these people, not just the ones from England, of course, but the ones from around the world, even from France, I have to say, but around the world, and of course, mostly from here in Israel. They are incredible people. Many of them, particularly along the Gaza border, were quite apprehensive, knowing that they were about to set foot into the most treacherous and dangerous battlefield probably you could find anywhere. But nevertheless, deeply resolved to defend their country. And it's not really like wars we've fought recently, thousands of miles away from home. This war, of course, is right on their doorstep, and they know exactly what happened on the 7th of October, and they're totally resolved, the ones I met anyway, totally resolved to go in and protect their family, their friends, their countrymen, and countrywomen. And I would say absolutely outstandingly courageous. As I mentioned, it's a tough battle that they're fighting, and yet they're willing, you know, all of these young people and some older people. I've met quite a lot of reservists, middle-aged people in some cases, who have been called up to the colours to fight again. And you may know that Israel mobilized about 360,000 people in the course of just about 48 hours. And you may not know that when they put out the call for the reservists, they got 130% response. So 30% more than they actually needed turned up to report for duty, which I think is extremely impressive and reflective of a country. When I arrived here, the country was, I would say, shattered and shocked. But very quickly, within a very small number of days, it was very obvious to me, all of the people I met, the most united I've ever seen Israelis. And you know as well as I do that Israelis are not necessarily that united, but they're now united. And like the soldiers on the front line, absolutely resolved and determined to deal with this threat to their country. I visited Kfar Aza and Sderot, two of the most badly hit places on the 7th of October. And I won't go into detail about what I saw, because you all know exactly what it's about. But to see it actually quite soon after the attacks occurred, to see it firsthand was actually extremely devastating. Seeing the sights of these towns that have been smashed to pieces, burnt, blown up, people murdered in their beds, and still the remains of a lot of it in these two places, cars shot up. Some corpses still not collected, although all the corpses I saw were corpses of terrorists rather than Israelis. The Israelis had been collected by that stage. So a devastating sight to see, even for someone like me, I've spent quite a lot of time on battlefields around the world. I've never really seen anything quite like that. I also watched the 45-minute video that the IDF has put together and shown to journalists and diplomats and defence attaches. I believe our Houses of Parliament also, some people viewed the video. I would not recommend that to anyone. It's one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And apart, I'm not going to again describe the horrors, but apart from the devastation and the brutality, the two things that really struck me, one was the joy and the pleasure on the faces of the terrorists that were doing it. I've never seen that quite like that before. I've seen terrorists attacking people, but I've never seen them getting so much pleasure from doing so. And the second thing that I saw, which I'll mention, is the remarkable level of skill, teamwork, communication, training that clearly these terrorists had received before going into these horrible attacks. And that, to me, says one thing. It says these are not a ragtag bunch of terrorists from Gaza. They're terrorists who've been trained by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran, which of course is the mastermind behind pretty much all of the strife that Israel faces today. I just want to do a quick whiz around of the theatres of operations that the IDF is involved in at the moment, and then I'm going to just finish off on Gaza. And first of all, you know this, Yemen, we've seen rockets and missiles and drones fired at Israel from Yemen, intercepted by the IDF and also by the US Navy. And we've most recently seen what I believe is an Israeli-owned ship, although I think that's disputed, but an Israeli or British-owned ship hijacked in the Red Sea by the Houthis, the Iranian proxies in Yemen. And very clearly, Israel's got to take action against Yemen. And the world probably should be taking action against Yemen, but certainly Israel will have to take some action against Yemen when the time is right. Then, of course, we have up in Lebanon on the Lebanese border, we've seen intensive violence and attacks from Hezbollah, again an Iranian proxy, and Hamas up in Lebanon. And today there were some devastating rocket attacks launched into the north of Israel. So again, that's a problem, a big problem that Israel will have to deal with. We've had quite a few IDF soldiers killed up there in recent weeks. Syria, again, another Iranian proxy groups there launching attacks against Israel. Very limited at the moment, but nevertheless, they made attempts, and again, it's another potential threat. The West Bank, we've seen Judea and Samaria, we've seen quite a lot of violence there, but I think as it appears at the moment to be under control again, Hamas included, many arrests have been made, many Hamas terrorists have been killed in Judea and Samaria. Again, this is much of it, not all of it, much of it is Iranian-inspired, funded and financed. And finally, inside Israel itself, before I move on to Gaza, I think that's been a little bit of a surprise, the Arab population here, where 2 years ago, there was a very significant uprising of the Arab population here. As I understand it, there's been nothing of that sort whatsoever here. And I did see a poll a few days ago which gives cause for optimism, which suggested that the Arab-Israeli population inside Israel proper, there's a significant upturn in Arab Israelis who identify with Israel and support Israel, a significant upturn since the attacks on the 7th of October, which I think is very encouraging. Now, just briefly onto Gaza itself. As you know, the IDF conducted a 3-week air campaign, very effective, smashing the hell out of Hamas inside Gaza, doing some real damage to them, wearing them down and killing large numbers of them before the troops went in on the ground 3 weeks later. And they've now been fighting for nearly 3 weeks inside Gaza. I think they've been making phenomenal progress there. It's been slow going, deliberately so, because of course, the faster you go, the more potential there is for Israeli casualties, and also the more potential there is to inflict civilian casualties. I'm not going to bore you with the detail of this, but from everything I've seen, as in previous conflicts that I've observed out here, the IDF is scrupulously observing the laws of armed conflict. There have been a lot of civilians killed, nothing like the numbers that have been churned out by the Hamas Gaza Health Ministry, which is not the NHS, it's a Hamas-controlled entity who inflate figures, and they don't differentiate between dead terrorists and dead civilians, or even terrorists they've killed themselves. They've killed a lot themselves. 15% of all Hamas and Islamic Jihad rockets fired out of Gaza have landed inside Gaza, fallen short, and in some cases killed some of their own civilians. So I think the overall numbers, even if they're anything like accurate, a significant number of them, a very significant number of them, are of course terrorists. And the IDF have, as in all previous conflicts, have been extremely careful to minimise civilian losses. And one point I would make is that I find it. I'm not Israeli and I'm not Jewish, but I do find it quite offensive when I hear world leaders saying we would like to remind Israel to adhere to the laws of war and to minimize the death of innocent civilians. Well, Israel does not need to be reminded of that. Israel is seen as a model around the world for fighting battles while minimizing the deaths of innocent civilians. and officers from other armies have been sent over here to observe how the IDF do it. So I just find it completely unnecessary and playing a bit into Hamas's hands by saying we encourage Israel to adhere to the laws of war. They don't need that encouragement. The level of casualties among the ones that have been killed, but nevertheless remarkably low so far, and let's hope the figures are kept down as low as they possibly can be. I have every confidence the IDF will be able to eliminate Hamas. That doesn't mean kill every single terrorist, but certainly chop off the top two tiers and get rid of as many others as possible. Before then, having hopefully what will be a period of some calm in Gaza before, as I believe will happen, the IDF will then retain security control over Gaza, whatever administrative arrangements are made for the administration of the Gaza Strip. So that's just my impression, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening. I have enormous confidence in the IDF, and I think, as I said before, you can be very proud of the way that they're fighting and of the immense courage of the individual soldiers, as well as the commanders who are directing them, and, in my view, the politicians that are directing them as well. Final point to make before I shut up, promise I will in a sec. I mentioned I've been here in the Carlton. While I've been here in the Carlton, I've been able to practice one of my greatest skills, and that is to act as Shabbat Goy, operating elevators for some of the refugees that are here. So that's my contribution to the war, really. Thank you very much.